Hey guys, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you 5 simple tips that will help you to get sub 1 on 4x4. Just a side note, this video will be aimed at people who use the Yao method on 4x4, so if you use other methods such as Hoyer or reduction, this video may not apply completely. So tip number 1 is get a good 4x4. So you may think it's the cube but not the cube, and yes, you can get sub 1 on pretty much any 4x4, but having a good 4x4 will definitely help you a lot. So this cube, the YJ Guansu, it's not the best cube, and I find that when I solve on this cube I get a lot worse times than when I solve on this, which is the magnetic Chi Wuchui. So I would recommend getting either the Aosu GTS M, which is another good 4x4, or magnetic Chi Wuchui. Even just the non-magnetic version is pretty good as well. When I switched from this to this, my times dropped insanely. So I went from averaging about 55 seconds down to about 47 seconds. My next tip is making sure to look ahead when you're finishing your second center. This may seem like a pretty small thing, but it's actually really big because on Yao you have to build your first 3 cross pieces. So I'm looking ahead and I'm seeing these 2. So then I can just bring that up there and get straight into that, and then already I'm seeing this one as well. So the reason that this is so important is at this stage you'll often pause a lot, which can really slow you down. So in 4x4 it's important to have your solve flow nicely, and because there's so many pieces that you need to look through to find the right piece, it's good to just be focusing on that so you can look ahead and you already know what moves you're going to do, so you can get straight into them rather than having a long pause and having to look for the pieces. Tip number 3 is build good habits. So sometimes you might see a technique that a fast cuber uses and you'll be like, oh, I won't bother switching to that. And I think that's definitely a bad decision because that can really help you out in the long run. I know me personally, I built my centers with cross on top, which made it a lot more awkward to finger trick, and after recently switching to using it with the cross on side, I've dropped my times by a lot. So these sort of things, it's really important that you do this and don't just sort of be lazy and not do it, because it really does help you out in the long run. So another example of a bad habit that you might want to remove that I experienced is I used to, during edge pairing, always sledge in. So in this case I'd be trying to get these 2 so that they would, when I slash across, they'll get built, but instead I would always sledge it in, so I'd go like that, which is quite a lot slower than just inserting it like that. So over time I had to get used to it, and it's a bit of a pain. If you just start with these good habits, then it's a lot easier in the long run. Tip number 4 is turning fast. I know I've said it's important to look ahead, but on 4x4 it's also pretty important to turn fast. So don't just turn really slowly, because you're going to have to do a lot of moves because 4x4 has a fairly high move count, and if you're turning super slowly the whole time, you're not going to get sub 1. So turning fast is pretty important, especially during stages such as edge pairing. So this can just make your solve go a lot faster, and edge pairing can be done insanely fast if you have really high TPS. So my final tip number 5, is improve your 3x3 stage. So when you're trying to get sub 1, you don't want a huge part of your solve to be taken up by the 3x3 stage, because that means you have to be going insanely fast on the other stages. So ideally you'd be averaging sub 20 on 3x3 for sub 1 on 4x4 at least, because if, say, you're averaging 30 seconds, that's about half of your solve on 3x3 stage, which should be one of the fastest stages. So despite having this cross already built, you're probably going to be a bit slower on 4x4 because it's not the ideal hardware to solve a 3x3 on, just because you've got sort of these and you can accidentally do wide moves and stuff. I mean, the hardware is pretty good, but you're probably going to be going a little bit slower than you would on a 3x3. Especially including parity and things like that. So I would say being sub 20 on 3x3 is a bit of a prerequisite to being sub 1 on 4x4, but I mean it is possible, but it's just a lot more difficult. So a few pieces of advice I would give to improve your 3x3 stage is parity and ways you can sort of avoid bad cases. So when you've got a case like this, you're always going to have, when you've got parity, you're always going to have one edge facing up or three edges facing up, because that's the only uneven number of edges. So if you've got one edge facing up, you should always do parity opposite that, because that will mean you'll get a line case, which are generally easier to do than fishhook cases. Another example is if you've got this, clearly you don't want to do it automatically on this side or something, because cross cases are far easier, and if you're using 2-look OLL, that'll be very useful because it will speed you up a bit. So you always want to do parity on the side that does not have an edge facing up, and that will result in you having a cross case. Another tip I have is when you've got this case, it's probably quite obvious to some of you guys that you should do parity with only the inner layers. So it's a bit faster to do it with the outer layers, but if you've got this case, you're going to get, if you do it with the outer layers, you're going to get this OLL, but if you do it with inner layers, then you're going to get an OLL skip, which is a lot faster. So for PLL parity, it's the same with OLL parity, don't get straight into doing the PLL parity algorithm if you notice you don't have a normal PLL, because sometimes you could save yourself a lot of time. So obviously this case is a pretty easy one, so you just have the simple PLL parity, and if you were to just do it here, then you'll get an H-perm, which is a pretty good case, but it'll speed you up a lot if you just do it with these two like that, because then you'll get a PLL skip. Another similar case is this case, so you've just got PLL parity like this. If you do this, a sexy move, and then you do your PLL parity algorithm, and then you put this pair back in, you'll get a PLL skip again. So yeah, that's all my tips I have. Thanks for watching, and I really hope that this video helps you to get sub 1 on 4x4.